Hey there, green thumbs and garden enthusiasts. Welcome back to Botanic Haven, your go-to channel for all things gardening, plant care, and creating those beautiful green spaces both indoors and out. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind a lot lately, especially as we're deep into February and the light outside looks about as inspiring as a cloudy day at the beach. We're diving into how to grow strong, healthy seedlings when Mother Nature seems determined to keep things dim and dreary. If you've ever started seeds in February, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those little sprouts need light to thrive, but February just doesn't want to cooperate. So let's chat about 15 care tips that actually work, based on real experience, real mistakes, and real successes from gardeners who've been there and figured it out. I remember when I first started growing seedlings indoors during winter. I was so excited, had all my seed trays lined up on the windowsill, thinking the natural light would be enough. Well, those poor seedlings stretched toward the window like they were reaching for a lifeline, getting tall and leggy and weak. My friend Daisy laughed when she saw them and said they looked like they were doing yoga poses trying to find the sun. That's when I learned that February light, even on a sunny day, just isn't strong enough for most seedlings. The sun sits lower in the sky, the days are shorter, and those precious hours of decent light are limited. But here's the good news. You absolutely can grow strong, stocky seedlings in February if you know what you're doing. It's not rocket science, but it does require some attention to detail and a willingness to give your plants what they need. The first thing you need to understand is that light is everything when it comes to seedling growth. Without adequate light, seedlings will stretch and become weak, a condition we call etiolation. They're literally searching for more light, putting all their energy into growing tall instead of growing strong. So if you're serious about starting seeds in February, you need to supplement natural light with artificial grow lights. I know some people resist this because they think it's complicated or expensive, but honestly, it's one of the best investments you can make. You don't need fancy equipment. A simple shop light with LED bulbs designed for plants will do the trick. Position them about 2 to 4 inches above your seedlings and keep them on for 14 to 16 hours a day. Oliver, a gardener I know who grows hundreds of seedlings every year, swears by this setup. He says his seedlings are stronger now than when he was spending twice as much on expensive grow light systems. The key is consistency and keeping those lights close enough that your plants actually benefit from them. Temperature is another huge factor that people often overlook. Seedlings are like Goldilocks. They want things just right. Too cold and they'll sulk and refuse to grow. Too hot and they'll get stressed and weak. Most vegetable seedlings prefer temperatures between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, with a slight drop at night. If you're starting seeds on a cold windowsill or in an unheated basement, they're going to struggle no matter how much light you give them. I learned this the hard way when I tried starting tomatoes in my garage. The light was perfect, but the temperature at night dropped into the 50s. And those poor tomatoes just sat there looking miserable for weeks. Once I moved them to a warmer spot, they took off like rockets. If your space is too cold, consider using a seedling heat mat underneath your trays. These mats provide gentle bottom heat that encourages germination and keeps roots happy. Just make sure to remove the mat or turn it off once the seeds have sprouted, because seedlings generally prefer slightly cooler conditions than seeds do during germination. Watering seedlings is an art form that takes practice to master. Too much water and you'll drown them or encourage fungal diseases like damping off, which is every seedling grower's nightmare. Too little water, and they'll dry out and die. The soil should be consistently moist, but never waterlogged. I like to water from the bottom whenever possible, letting the trays sit in a shallow pan of water until the soil surface feels moist. This encourages roots to grow downwards, searching for moisture, which creates stronger plants. Rose, another gardening friend, uses a spray bottle to mist the soil surface for the first few days after seeds sprout, then switches to bottom watering once the seedlings are established. She says this method helps prevent disturbing the tiny roots and keeps fungal problems at bay. Whatever method you choose, check your seedlings daily because those small containers can dry out quickly, especially under grow lights. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Now let's talk about soil, because not all potting mixes are created equal. Seedlings need a light, fluffy mix that drains well but still holds moisture. Heavy garden soil is a no-go because it compacts easily and can harbour diseases. I always use a sterile seed starting mix specifically formulated for seedlings. These mixes usually contain peat moss or coir, perlite and vermiculite, creating the perfect environment for young roots. Some gardeners add a bit of compost for nutrients, but I prefer to wait until transplanting time because seed starting mixes are designed to be lean. Seedlings don't need much fertilizer in the beginning. They get everything they need from the seed itself for the first couple of weeks. Once they develop their first true leaves, that's when you can start thinking about feeding them. Speaking of feeding, fertilizing seedlings is something that needs a gentle touch. Young plants have delicate roots that can be easily burned by too much fertilizer. Once your seedlings have their first set of true leaves, which are the second set of leaves that appear after the initial seed leaves, you can start feeding them with a diluted liquid fertilizer. I use half the recommended strength and apply it every week or two. Some people prefer fish emulsion, while others like kelp-based fertilizers or standard balanced liquid feeds. Ivy, who runs a small market garden, told me she uses compost tea for her seedlings and swears it creates the healthiest plants she's ever grown. The important thing is to feed regularly, but lightly. Think of it like feeding a baby. Small amounts frequently works better than overwhelming them with a feast all at once. Air circulation is something most beginning gardeners don't think about, but it's crucial for preventing disease and creating strong stems. In nature, wind and breeze create movement that strengthens plant stems. Indoors, without that natural movement, seedlings can grow weak and floppy. A small oscillating fan set on low, positioned to create gentle movement across your seedlings, makes a huge difference. Run it for a few hours each day and you'll notice your plants develop thicker, sturdier stems. Lucas, a greenhouse grower I met at a garden show, demonstrated this beautifully. He had 2 batches of the same tomato variety growing side by side. One batch had been grown with a fan, the other without. The difference was remarkable. The plants grown with air circulation had stems twice as thick and were visibly more robust. That simple fan had transformed weaker plants into powerhouses ready for the garden. Spacing your seedlings properly is another detail that matters more than you might think. When seeds first sprout, it's tempting to leave them all crowded together because they look so small and cute. But seedlings compete for light, water and nutrients, and overcrowding leads to weak, spindly plants that are prone to disease. Once your seedlings have their first true leaves, it's time to thin them out, or transplant them into individual containers. I know it feels brutal to pull out perfectly good seedlings, but trust me, the remaining plants will thank you. If you can't bear to toss the extras, transplant them into their own pots and give them to friends. Proper spacing ensures each plant has room to develop a strong root system and access to adequate light and air circulation. Think of it as giving each plant its own apartment instead of cramming them all into a studio. Hardening off is the process that bridges the gap between your cozy indoor setup and the harsh reality of the outdoor garden. This step is absolutely critical, and skipping it can shock your plants and set them back weeks or even kill them. About a week before you plan to transplant your seedlings outdoors, start exposing them to outdoor conditions gradually. Begin with an hour or two in a protected, shady spot, then gradually increase the time and exposure to sun and wind over 7 to 10 days. This process helps plants adjust to temperature fluctuations, direct sunlight and wind without going into shock. I made the mistake once of transplanting seedlings directly from indoors to the garden on what seemed like a nice, mild day. By evening, they looked like they'd been through a war, all wilted and sad. It took them weeks to recover, and some never did. Since then, I've been religious about hardening off, and my transplant success rate has skyrocketed. Container choice might seem trivial, but it actually affects how your seedlings grow. The classic plastic cell packs work fine for most things, but they're shallow and dry out quickly. For plants that develop deep root systems quickly, like tomatoes or peppers, I prefer starting them in deeper containers after the initial germination. Some people love using soil blocks, which eliminate the container altogether and encourage incredible root development. Others swear by biodegradable pots made from peat or cow manure that can be planted directly into the garden. I've experimented with all of these, and honestly, they all work if you match the container to the plant's needs and your growing timeline. The main thing is ensuring adequate drainage. Seedlings sitting in waterlogged soil will develop root rot faster than you can say damping off. Every container needs drainage holes, no exceptions. Timing your seed starting is crucial and depends on your last frost date and how long each plant needs to grow before transplanting. Starting seeds too early means you'll have overgrown, root-bound seedlings that struggle after transplanting. Starting too late means you miss out on the growing season. Most vegetables need 6 to 8 weeks of indoor growing time before they're ready for the garden. Some, like peppers and eggplants, need even longer. I keep a simple calendar noting when to start each type of seed based on my area's average last frost date. Daisy showed me this trick years ago and it saved me from countless timing disasters. She has a whole notebook filled with notes about what she started when, how it performed, and what she'd do differently next year. That kind of record keeping might seem obsessive, but it really does help you improve year after year. Disease prevention is something you need to think about from day one. Damping off, a fungal disease that causes seedlings to suddenly collapse and die, is heartbreaking and frustratingly common. Good air circulation helps, but so does avoiding overwatering and using sterile soil and clean containers. Some gardeners water with chamomile tea, which has natural antifungal properties, or sprinkle cinnamon on the soil surface as a preventative measure. I've tried both with good results, though I can't say scientifically whether they're truly effective or if my improved watering practices deserve the credit. What I do know is that prevention is worth a pound of cure. Once damping off strikes, there's usually not much you can do except remove affected seedlings immediately and hope it doesn't spread. Keeping things clean, ensuring good drainage, and avoiding overcrowding are your best defenses. Labeling might sound boring, but trust me, it matters. Unless you have a photographic memory or you're only growing 1 or 2 varieties, you will forget what you planted where. I learned this lesson when I had 8 different tomato varieties started, all looking identical as seedlings, and no labels because I was certain I'd remember. Spoiler alert, I did not remember. Now I label everything immediately using plastic markers and a permanent marker, noting the variety and date planted. Some people use popsicle sticks. Others prefer fancy engraved labels, and some gardeners swear by smartphone apps that track their seedlings. Use whatever system works for you, but use something. Future, you will be grateful when you're planning your garden layout and actually know which seedlings are which. Transplanting timing is an art you develop through experience, but there are some general guidelines that help. Seedlings are usually ready to move to larger containers when their roots start to fill the current container and they've developed several sets of true leaves. If you wait too long, they become root-bound, with roots circling the container and growth slowing down. If you transplant too soon, you risk disturbing tender roots unnecessarily. When you do transplant, handle seedlings by their leaves, not their stems. Stems are delicate and damage easily, while leaves can recover from gentle handling. Plant them deep, burying the stem up to the first set of leaves if possible, especially for tomatoes. This encourages additional root development along the buried stem, creating stronger plants. Water thoroughly after transplanting and keep newly transplanted seedlings out of direct bright light for a day or two while they recover from the shock. Patience is perhaps the most important tip of all, and it's definitely the hardest for most gardeners to master. Seeds germinate on their own schedule, and some are naturally slower than others. Peppers can take 2 weeks or more, while lettuce might sprout in just a few days. Seedlings grow at different rates too, and sometimes, despite your best efforts, some just don't thrive. That's okay. Gardening is full of variables we can't control, and sometimes plants just don't cooperate. I've had seasons where my tomatoes were absolute superstars and my peppers sulked the whole time. The next year, it was reversed. Every growing season teaches you something new, and that's part of the joy. Keep notes, pay attention to what works in your specific conditions, and don't beat yourself up when things don't go perfectly. Even experienced gardeners have failures, and often those failures teach us more than our successes. Now let me share something that really changed my seedling game, and that's understanding the importance of light spectrum. Not all light is created equal, and plants respond differently to different wavelengths. Blue light promotes compact, bushy growth and strong stems, which is exactly what you want in seedlings. Red light encourages flowering and fruiting, which matters later but not so much in the seedling stage. This is why those purple-looking grow lights you see are so popular. They're providing the specific wavelengths plants need most. But here's a secret that Oliver taught me. Full-spectrum LED lights, the kind that look white to our eyes, work just as well and are easier on your eyes when you're checking on your plants. You don't need to get too scientific about it, but understanding that plants see light differently than we do helps you make better choices about your setup. Humidity is another factor that deserves more attention than it usually gets. February indoor air tends to be dry because of heating systems running constantly. And while mature plants can handle low humidity reasonably well, seedlings struggle with it. Their tiny leaves lose moisture quickly in dry air, and they can become stressed even when the soil is moist. I learned this from Rose, who kept a humidity gauge near her seedling setup, and noticed her plants perked up significantly when she started running a small humidifier nearby. If you don't want to invest in a humidifier, you can create a humid microclimate by placing trays of water near your seedlings or grouping plants together so they create their own little humid zone. Some people cover their seed trays with clear plastic domes until the seeds germinate, which keeps humidity high and helps with germination rates. Just remember to remove the dome as soon as you see sprouts, or you'll encourage fungal problems. Let me tell you about a technique that Ivy swears by for creating the strongest possible seedlings, and that's bottom heat combined with cooler air temperatures. This might sound contradictory, but it actually mimics natural spring conditions where the soil warms up from the sun, but the air is still cool. She uses heat mats to keep soil temperature around 70 to 75 degrees, but keeps the room temperature around 65 degrees. This temperature differential encourages robust root growth while preventing top growth from getting too leggy. The seedlings focus their energy on developing strong root systems, which is exactly what you want. When those plants get transplanted, they have the root mass to support vigorous growth and can handle stress better. It's a simple trick that makes a noticeable difference, especially for heat-loving plants like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. Seed quality is something we should talk about too, because not all seeds are equal. Old seeds or seeds that haven't been stored properly have lower germination rates and often produce weaker seedlings. I always check the date on seed packets and do a germination test if I'm using seeds that are more than a year or two old. Testing is simple. Place 10 seeds on a damp paper towel, fold it over, put it in a plastic bag, and keep it warm for a week. Count how many germinate, and that gives you your germination percentage. If only 5 out of 10 sprout, you know you need to plant more thickly to compensate, or better yet, invest in fresh seeds. Lucas told me he refuses to use seeds older than 2 years for his market garden because the vigor of the resulting plants is noticeably lower. While seeds can remain viable for many years if stored properly, fresher seeds generally give you a better start. One more thing that's worth mentioning is the concept of succession planting, even with your seedlings. Instead of starting all your tomatoes or lettuce or whatever at once, stagger your plantings by a week or two. This gives you backup plants in case something goes wrong with the first batch, and it also extends your harvest window. Daisy does this religiously with her lettuce, starting a new tray every 2 weeks throughout February and March. By the time spring rolls around, she has plants at different stages of maturity ready to go into the garden at different times. This approach takes the pressure off too, because if one batch doesn't do well, you've got others coming along behind. It's like having insurance for your garden. Something else I've learned over the years is the value of observation and being present with your seedlings. This might sound a bit philosophical for gardening advice, but hear me out. When you check on your plants daily, you start to notice subtle changes that can alert you to problems before they become serious. Maybe the leaves look a slightly different shade of green, or they're not quite as perky as they were yesterday, or the soil is drying out faster than usual. These little clues tell you what's going on with your plants if you pay attention. I started keeping a simple journal where I jot down quick observations each day. Nothing fancy, just things like watered today, adjusted lights closer, noticed new growth on the peppers. Over time, these notes have helped me identify patterns and understand what works best in my specific growing environment. Every space is different, and what works perfectly for Oliver or Ivy might need tweaking for your situation. Let me share a story about learning from mistakes, because honestly, that's how most of us really learn to grow better seedlings. A few years back, I was growing basil seedlings, and they were doing beautifully lush and green and perfect. I was so proud of them. Then one day I decided to water them in the evening instead of my usual morning routine because I'd been busy all day. The next morning, half of them had collapsed from damping off. I was devastated. Turns out watering in the evening meant the soil stayed wet and cool overnight, creating perfect conditions for the fungus to strike. Since then, I always water in the morning, giving plants time to dry off before the cooler night temperatures arrive. That painful lesson taught me more than any book could have about the importance of timing in plant care. Every mistake is just information about what doesn't work, bringing you one step closer to figuring out what does. Another technique I've adopted from Rose is the practice of touching your seedlings gently every day. It sounds weird, I know, but there's actually science behind it. When you gently brush your hand across the tops of your seedlings, it triggers a response similar to wind, causing the plants to produce more ethylene, which results in shorter, sturdier stems. Rose demonstrated this for me with 2 batches of tomato seedlings. One batch she brushed daily for about 30 seconds, the other she left untouched. After 2 weeks, the difference was obvious. The touched seedlings were noticeably stockier and more robust. Now I make it part of my daily routine. It takes less than a minute and gives me another excuse to spend time with my plants, which honestly is part of the joy of growing things anyway. The beautiful thing about growing seedlings in February, despite the challenging light conditions, is that it connects us to the rhythm of the seasons and gives us hope during the coldest, darkest part of the year. There's something magical about nurturing tiny seeds into strong plants, while snow might still be falling outside. It's an act of faith and optimism, a tangible reminder that spring is coming and the growing season will return. Every time I check on my seedlings under their grow lights, adjusting the fan or checking soil moisture, I feel connected to generations of gardeners who've done the same thing, coaxing life from seeds in the depths of winter. Those strong seedlings you're growing now will become the backbone of your summer garden, providing food and beauty for months to come. The lessons you learn caring for these vulnerable little plants teach you patience, observation skills, and attention to detail that will serve you well throughout the entire growing season. You'll develop an eye for spotting problems early, a feel for when plants need water, and an intuition about what your plants need. These skills are invaluable and can only be learned through hands-on experience. So take your time, pay attention to the details, give your plants what they need, and enjoy the process. Remember that every gardener started somewhere, made mistakes, learned from them, and got better over time. Your February seedlings might not be perfect this year, but they'll be better than last year's. And next year's will be even better. That's the journey of gardening, always learning, always growing, always reaching for improvement. Before you know it, you'll be transplanting those healthy, vigorous seedlings into the garden and watching them flourish. Here at Botanic Haven, we're all about sharing what works, learning from each other, celebrating both successes and failures, and always keeping that love of growing things alive no matter what challenges the season throws at us. Happy growing, friends, and may your seedlings be strong, your garden abundant, and your February filled with the green promise of spring to come.